The rain hammered down on my windshield like 1,000 tiny drummers, each beat urging me to turn back. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling the car sway slightly under the fierce gusts of wind. The ocean roared beside me, its waves crashing violently against the rocks, sending sprays of salt water into the air. I had always loved the sea, but tonight it felt angry, as if it were warning me to stay away. Just a little further, I muttered to myself, my voice barely audible over the tempest outside. I was on the coastal road, and though I had become accustomed to driving in tough weather, this storm was something else entirely. Lightning slashed through the sky, illuminating the dark clouds for a mere heartbeat. But in that fleeting moment, I spotted it, the lighthouse. Its beam cut through the darkness like a sword, and an inexplicable pull tugged at my heart. I felt drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, and I knew I had to find shelter. The faraway light promised safety, a refuge from the chaos raging outside. I turned the steering wheel, the tires skidding slightly on the slick road as I veered toward the entrance of the lighthouse. My heart raced with both fear and excitement as I parked the car. The wind howled around me, and I hesitated for just a moment, staring at the towering structure. It loomed over me, sturdy yet solitary against the backdrop of the storm. Gathering my courage, I stepped out into the downpour, the cold rain soaking through my clothes almost instantly. I dashed toward the door, my shoes splashing through puddles, and pushed it open with a creak that echoed through the dimly lit interior. The smell of old wood and mildew enveloped me, and I took a moment to catch my breath. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was deafening, but inside, it was eerily quiet. As I stepped inside, the light from the lantern flickered overhead, casting unsettling shadows around the room. My eyes fell on a dusty table in the corner, cluttered with abandoned objects. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed a diary lying open, its pages yellowed with age. I approached it cautiously, feeling an overwhelming sense of curiosity. "What secrets do you hold?" I whispered to myself, gently brushing the dust off the cover. The leather was cracked, and I could see the intricate design worn away by time. I opened it carefully, revealing the neat cursive handwriting inside. The first few lines spoke of the sailor's life, his love for the sea, and the adventures he had experienced. Suddenly, the light above me flickered again, and an unsettling sense of being watched washed over me. I turned around abruptly, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the room was empty, just me and the storm. I shook my head, trying to dispel the feeling. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered, forcing myself to focus on the diary once more. The pages turned easily under my fingertips, revealing the story of Henry, a man who seemed to have loved fiercely. His words poured out with passion, detailing his feelings for a woman named Clara, who lived in the nearby village. "Clara?" I repeated softly, the name rolling off my tongue like a forgotten melody. The tone of the entries shifted as I continued reading. The romance twisted into something darker, filled with jealousy and sorrow. Henry wrote about his fears of losing her, the tempest of emotions that raged within him, feelings I could almost relate to. I flipped the page, my heart racing as I discovered a small drawing of Clara. She was depicted with flowing hair and a smile that seemed to radiate warmth, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Below the sketch, a note caught my eye, mentioning a fateful night at sea, a night that seemed to haunt the pages that followed. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. I felt a strange connection to this story, as if fate had drawn me here to uncover the truth. Just as I was about to lose myself in the narrative, I heard a sound behind me, a soft shuffling, almost like a whisper. I spun around quickly, my pulse quickening. "Hello!" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the sound of the wind howling outside. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something here, something that didn't want me to leave. I took a deep breath and returned to the diary, my heart pounding in my ears. The storm raged on outside, but here, in this old lighthouse, I felt oddly compelled to keep reading. Each entry painted a vivid picture of Henry's life, his dreams, and his despair. A few pages later, I stumbled upon a passage that made my stomach twist. Henry described a confrontation he had with a rival, a man who loved Clara just as fiercely. The jealousy poured from the ink, and I felt the tension rise off the pages. I could almost hear the crashing waves outside as if they were echoing Henry's turmoil. Why couldn't he just let go? I said aloud, feeling a strange empathy for this man I had never met. Love can be so cruel. Just then, another flicker of light caught my eye, pulling me from the depths of my thoughts. I looked up and noticed a faint shadow moving in the corner of the room. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness, but when I focused on the spot, it was empty again. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of fear creeping in. It's just the storm playing tricks on me, I reassured myself, though the feeling of being watched lingered. I continued to delve deeper into Henry's life, and with each word, I felt more and more engrossed in his world. The diary told of his love for Clara, the moments they shared, and the dreams they had for their future. But as I turned the pages, the air grew heavier, filled with an unshakable sense of dread. Why did it have to end this way? I murmured, the weight of the story pressing down on me. What happened to you, Henry? I was interrupted by a loud crash outside, causing me to jump. The storm was relentless, and it seemed to be intensifying by the second. I glanced out the small window, but all I could see was darkness and sheets of rain. Maybe I should just leave, I thought, feeling a surge of panic. But the pull of the diary was too strong. I had to know more. I returned to the pages, my eyes scanning the words frantically. Henry's anguish poured out of the pages, revealing his deepest fears and regrets. As I read, I could feel the weight of his spirit in the room, as if he were urging me to uncover the truth that had bound him to this place. Henry, I whispered, I'm here. I want to help you. But as I spoke, a chilling draft swept through the room, and I felt a presence behind me once again. I turned, my body tense, but there was nothing there. Just the shadowy corners of the lighthouse and the storm howling like a banshee outside. Maybe I'm just tired, I reasoned, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. I'll just read a little more, then I'll go. As I continued to read, the storm outside seemed to echo Henry's turmoil, the wind wailing a mournful tune. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled deeper into this story, as if I were becoming part of it myself. The last entry I read spoke of a secret meeting between Henry and Clara on the beach, a night filled with promises and dreams, but one that would ultimately lead to tragedy. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I realized this was the moment everything changed. Clara? I whispered, feeling a pang of sadness for both of them. What happened on that night? Just as I closed the diary, a loud crash of thunder reverberated through the lighthouse, shaking the very foundation. I jumped, heart racing, and closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, I was met with the flickering light of the lantern, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Okay, this is getting ridiculous, I said aloud, shaking my head. I need to find out what happened. But outside, the storm continued to rage, and I was trapped in the lighthouse, caught between my fear and the need to uncover the truth. As I stood there, the echoes of Henry's words filled the air, urging me to seek out the answers that had eluded him for so long. With a deep breath, I made up my mind. I could not leave now. I had to face whatever lay ahead, both for Henry and for myself. The storm might be fierce, but the light of the lighthouse burned bright, and it was calling me to stay. The rain lashed against my windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop a reminder of the tempest brewing outside. As I gripped the steering wheel, the car swayed from side to side, battling the furious winds that seemed to want to drag me off the road. The ocean roared nearby, its waves crashing violently against the rocky shore, a sound both mesmerizing and terrifying. I squinted through the downpour, my heart racing as I caught sight of a flickering light in the distance. A lighthouse! Thank God! I muttered to myself, my voice barely audible over the storm. I turned the steering wheel sharply, the tires skidding slightly on the wet pavement as I made my way toward the beacon. It felt like a sanctuary, a promise of safety amid the chaos of nature's wrath. As I parked the car and stepped out, the wind whipped my hair around my face, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I sprinted toward the lighthouse, each step splashing through puddles that had formed on the ground. The door creaked open with a heavy groan, revealing a dark interior illuminated only by the weak light flickering above. The smell of dampness and mildew hit me like a wall as I stepped inside, a stark contrast to the salty air outside. I shook the water from my hair and glanced around. The interior was worn and neglected, the walls lined with peeling paint, and shadows danced in the corners. My eyes were drawn to a table in the center of the room, where an old, dusty journal lay open, pages yellowed with age. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding. As I reached for the journal, I felt a chill run down my spine, the kind that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I brushed my fingers over the brittle pages, the ink fading but still legible. The first few lines spoke of a man named Henry, a sailor, it seemed, with a love for the sea, and a woman named Clara from the village nearby. Clara? I whispered, the name rolling off my tongue like a secret. The further I read, the more I felt drawn into Henry's world. He wrote passionately about his love for Clara, his dreams of sailing away with her, and the beautiful life they would build together. But soon the tone shifted. The words became darker, filled with jealousy and despair. He wrote of a rival, someone who threatened to tear them apart, someone whose jealousy could bind them in tragedy. Why does every love story have to end in heartbreak? I murmured, feeling an inexplicable connection to Henry's words. I turned the page, and my breath caught in my throat. There, sketched delicately in the margins, was a drawing of Clara. Her features were ethereal, her long hair flowing like the waves of the ocean, her smile radiant. Beneath the drawing, a note read, "The moonlit beach, our secret rendezvous. I will wait for you, my love." A shiver ran through me, and I glanced over my shoulder. The wind howled outside, the storm raging with a ferocity that felt almost alive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in the lighthouse. It was as if the very walls were watching me, waiting for me to uncover their secrets. The next entry in the journal sent a jolt of fear through me. Henry described a fateful night, the night he and Clara planned to meet at the beach. His words were frantic, filled with desperation as he recounted a fight with his rival, a confrontation that would change everything. "If only I could turn back time," he wrote, his anguish palpable even through the ages. Who was this rival? I asked aloud, my voice echoing in the silence. I felt as though the air itself thickened around me, as if the lighthouse was holding its breath, waiting for me to piece together the fragments of this tragic love story. Suddenly, a noise broke the stillness, a soft rustling behind me. My heart raced as I whipped around, half expecting to see Clara standing there, a ghostly figure woven from the very fabric of Henry's memories. But the space behind me was empty, the shadows stretching longer as the light flickered again. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered, trying to shake off the creeping unease. I forced myself to refocus on the journal, but my mind was swirling with thoughts of Henry and Clara, their love and the dark forces that had conspired against them. I flipped through the pages of the journal, searching for more clues, more answers. Each entry painted a picture of passion intertwined with sorrow, secrets unveiled against the backdrop of the stormy sea. The tale of jealousy grew more complex, revealing layers of betrayal and heartache that made my own troubles seem insignificant. "Henry?" I whispered, as if calling out to the spirit that lingered in the room. "What happened to you? What went wrong on that night?" The wind outside howled louder, almost as if responding to my questions. I could almost hear the whispers of the past, echoing through the walls of the lighthouse. It was then that I realized this was more than just a tale of love lost. It was a cry for justice, a plea for someone to remember. I continued to read, my heart heavy with each revelation. Clara, it seemed, had been caught in the crossfire of Henry's rivalry. The notes hinted at a promise broken, of a love that could not survive the shadows lurking in the hearts of men. As I turned yet another page, I stumbled upon something that made me freeze. A drawing, much like the first, but this time depicting a stormy sea, a ship tossed about by waves, and in the foreground, a figure standing on the shore, watching helplessly. The note beneath it read, "I must find her. She must know the truth before it's too late." A chill ran through me, and I felt the weight of the journal pressing down on my chest. Henry's desperation seeped into my own heart, and I could no longer ignore the feeling that I was meant to uncover this truth. Suddenly, the air shifted, and I felt a presence behind me again. I turned, my heart pounding in my ears, but once more, the room was empty. The only sound was the relentless rain and the crashing waves. Yet, this time, a whisper brushed against my ear, barely audible above the storm. "Help me? Help you," I replied, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken words. I felt an overwhelming urge to continue reading, as if the very essence of Henry's soul urged me onward. The storm was still raging outside, but I was no longer just a bystander. I was woven into the fabric of this haunting tale. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. I had to know what happened to Henry and Clara. I had to understand the tragedy that had unfolded on that fateful night. With a renewed sense of purpose, I delved deeper into the journal, ready to uncover the truth that had been buried beneath layers of time and sorrow. The rain pounded down on my car like a relentless drummer, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the torrent. I squinted through the downpour, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as I navigated the winding road that hugged the cliffside. The ocean roared below, waves crashing against jagged rocks, sending plumes of spray into the air. I was soaked to the bone, and the chill in the air seeped into my bones. Just as I began to wonder if I'd ever find shelter, a flicker of light caught my eye in the distance. A lighthouse, its beam cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope amidst the storm. I pressed on, the tires skidding slightly as I turned onto the gravel path leading to the lighthouse. Each bump sent jolts through my body, but I was too desperate for refuge to care. As I parked and stepped out, a gust of wind nearly knocked me off my feet. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and dashed toward the entrance, feeling the rain lash against my skin like icy needles. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and salt. A faint glow from the lanterns hanging on the walls provided just enough light to guide my way. The sound of the storm outside faded slightly, but the crash of the waves remained a constant reminder of nature's fury. My gaze fell upon a dust-covered table in the corner, and I approached it, drawn by an inexplicable urge. A dusty old diary lay there, its leather cover cracked and worn. I picked it up and brushed off the dust, revealing the initials HM embossed on the front. As I opened it, the pages fluttered slightly, as if the book itself were alive. The first few entries spoke of mundane things, weather patterns, tides, and local gossip. But as I delved deeper, the tone shifted, revealing a story steeped in romance and tragedy. Henry, the author, was a sailor, and his words dripped with passion for a woman named Clara. My heart raced as I read about their love, a flame that burned brightly in the face of adversity. But as I continued, the sweet narrative turned dark. Jealousy and betrayal seeped into Henry's words, twisting the love story into something sinister. I could feel the weight of his sorrow pressing against my chest as I absorbed his pain. Suddenly, the light flickered above me, and an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. I paused, glancing around the room, an unsettling feeling creeping over me. Was I truly alone in this old lighthouse? As I continued reading, I felt a presence behind me, a heaviness that seemed to envelop the air. I turned quickly, my heart racing, but found nothing but shadows dancing in the dim light. The whispers of the storm outside grew louder, and a faint sound, like distant murmurs, reached my ears. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. It was just the wind, I told myself. Just the wind. Determined not to let my imagination run wild, I focused on the diary once more. The entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing a fateful night on the sea. A night where love would be tested against the merciless tides. I was captivated, yet uneasy, as if the very walls of the lighthouse were closing in on me. The air felt thick, charged with energy, as if the spirits of the past were watching my every move. Driven by a need to understand the truth behind Henry's tragic fate, I decided to seek out the locals. I closed the diary, placing it back on the table, and steeled myself for the confrontation with the villagers. With every step out of the lighthouse, the wind howled around me, as if warning me to turn back. But I pressed on, my curiosity outweighing my fear. Once outside, the storm raged on, but I could make out the outline of a small cottage nearby. I headed toward it, a sense of purpose guiding my way. As I knocked on the door, my heart raced in anticipation. The door creaked open to reveal an elderly woman, her face etched with lines that told stories of hardship and resilience. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked, her voice a raspy whisper that seemed to blend with the wind. "I'm looking for information about Henry," I replied, the name feeling heavy on my tongue. "Henry Miller. I found his diary at the lighthouse." The woman's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and apprehension. "Ah, Henry," she murmured, shaking her head slowly. "That lighthouse is a cursed place, you know. Many have felt its wrath." "Cursed?" I echoed, incredulous. "What do you mean?" She stepped aside, allowing me to enter. Come in, come in. "It's not safe out there," she urged, her eyes darting to the stormy horizon. Henry was a good man, but his love for Clara turned tragic. The villagers still whisper about it. I took a seat at a rustic wooden table, the warmth of the cottage a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "What happened to him?" I pressed, eager for answers. Agnes, as she introduced herself, began to recount the tale. Henry was a sailor, full of life and dreams. He loved Clara, a sweet girl from the village. But there was another, a man named Tom, who had his eyes set on Clara as well. The rivalry grew fierce, and jealousy festered like an open wound. I leaned forward, hanging on to her every word. "What did Tom do?" Her eyes darkened. "One fateful night, Henry took Clara out to the sea, promising her the stars. But Tom, filled with rage, followed them. What happened next is a mystery, but they say the storm that night was unnatural. When dawn broke, only Henry's body was found, washed ashore. Clara was never seen again." A chill ran down my spine. The diary hinted at tragedy, but hearing it from Agnes felt different, more real, more haunting. "And the lighthouse? Why is it considered cursed?" Agnes sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's said that Henry's spirit lingers there, unable to find peace. He watches over the sea, waiting for Clara. Some believe he still calls to her, hoping she will return." My thoughts raced. I felt inexplicably drawn to the lighthouse, as if it were calling me. "I need to know more," I said, determination filling my voice. "Can you tell me where I might find Clara?" Agnes's eyes widened. "You mustn't. She's a ghost of the past, lost to the waves. The villagers avoid speaking of her, afraid of invoking Henry's wrath. You should leave well enough alone." Before I could respond, the door swung open, and a young man stormed in, rain dripping from his clothes. He looked at me with suspicion, his jaw clenched tight. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp like the wind outside. "Tom, wait," Agnes interjected. "He's just seeking answers about Henry." Tom's gaze bore into me, his eyes dark and stormy. "You shouldn't be digging into things that don't concern you. Henry's memory is not for you to toy with. Leave this village while you still can." "Why do you care so much?" I shot back, frustration boiling within me. "What happened to Henry? What role did you play in his death?" Tom took a step closer, his fists clenching at his sides. "You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what it's like to lose someone you care about." The tension in the room crackled like the storm outside. I could feel the weight of their history pressing down on us. "But I want to understand," I said, my voice rising. "I want to help him find peace. He deserves that." "Peace?" Tom scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can just waltz in here and fix what's broken? You have no idea what you're up against." I stared at him, a mixture of anger and confusion swirling inside me. "What are you hiding, Tom? There's more to this story than you're telling." Agnes looked between us, concern etched on her face. "Let's not escalate this. It's best to leave the past buried." But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something lurking just beneath the surface. I needed answers, and I wouldn't back down so easily. Tom's eyes flashed with something. Was it fear? Guilt? Whatever it was, I felt it resonate deep within me. As I turned to leave the cottage, a sense of urgency consumed me. The lighthouse awaited, and I could feel Henry's spirit drawing me back, urging me to uncover the truth. I stepped out into the storm once more, the rain drenching my clothes, but I didn't care. The path lay ahead, and I was determined to follow it, no matter where it led. The storm raged outside, its fury crashing against the car windows as I struggled to keep the vehicle on the winding coastal road. The rain was relentless, pouring down in sheets, and the wind howled like a beast, threatening to push me off the narrow path that hugged the shore. My heart raced, not just from the anxiety of driving in such conditions, but also from the eerie sensation that enveloped me. I needed to find shelter, and fast. Through the curtain of rain, I caught a glimpse of a beacon of hope, an old lighthouse standing proud against the tempest. Its light cut through the darkness, guiding me like a siren's call. I made a split-second decision, steering the car toward the far-off glow. As I approached, the lighthouse loomed larger, a majestic yet foreboding structure that seemed to beckon me closer. I parked hastily, my heart pounding as I scrambled out of the car, the icy rain soaking me within seconds. I dashed to the entrance, pushing the heavy door open with a creak that echoed in the hollow space. Inside, the smell of dampness and mold hit me like a wall. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below filled the air, a constant reminder of the storm's rage outside. As I stepped further into the lighthouse, I noticed a dusty wooden table in the center of the room. An old journal lay there, its cover cracked and worn. Curiosity piqued. I reached for it, brushing off the layers of dust that had settled on its surface. I flipped open the cover, and as I began to read, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The light above flickered ominously, casting shadows that danced around me, and for a moment, I felt as if I were not alone. The pages spoke of a man named Henry, a sailor whose heart belonged to a woman named Clara. Their love was vibrant and passionate, yet the tone of the writing shifted darker as the entries progressed. I could sense the anguish and jealousy creeping into his words, an all-consuming despair that hinted at an impending tragedy. I was entranced, but as I read deeper, a creeping unease settled in my stomach. I heard a soft rustling behind me, a sound that made me spin around, heart racing. Nothing, just the empty room and the relentless roar of the storm outside. Perhaps it was my imagination playing tricks on me, but the sensation of being watched lingered. I shook it off, forcing myself to focus on the diary. Each entry drew me further into Henry's life, his dreams, and his fears. I could almost see Clara's face as he described her laughter, her beauty, the way the sunlight danced in her hair. But then the mood shifted again. There were whispers of betrayal, of dark secrets hidden beneath the surface of their love. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil of Henry's heart, and I felt as though I were entwined in their tragic story. Suddenly, I flipped to a page that bore a sketch of Clara's face, so lifelike it sent shivers down my spine. Below the drawing, a note described a fateful evening, an encounter on the beach where they had promised to meet, a night that ultimately led to heartbreak and loss. My heart raced as I read the words, feeling an inexplicable connection to their story. I was determined to uncover the truth behind the tragedy that had unfolded here. Just as I settled into the weight of the narrative, a loud crash of thunder jolted me back to reality. I glanced around the dimly lit room, and the sensation of being observed intensified. It was as if the walls themselves were listening, holding secrets that begged to be revealed. With a sense of urgency, I resolved to delve deeper into the mystery of Henry and Clara. But the storm outside raged on, a constant reminder that I was trapped in this place, caught between the tales of the past and the chaos of the present. Hours seemed to pass as I buried myself in the journal, the words pulling me into a world beyond my own. I was drawn to the emotions poured onto the pages, the love, the heartbreak, the jealousy. Each entry felt like a ghost whispering from the past, urging me to understand, to help. I could almost hear Henry's cries for justice, and they resonated within me. Then, as I turned another page, I felt a wave of weariness wash over me. The flickering light above cast ghostly shadows, and with the sound of the storm outside lulling me into a trance, I succumbed to sleep. In the depths of my slumber, a figure emerged before me, Henry. His translucent form hovered in the air, eyes filled with a mix of desperation and longing. "Help me," he implored, his voice a haunting whisper that sent chills racing through me. "You must uncover the truth of my death." I wanted to reach for him, to pull him from the shadows of despair, but I felt anchored to the spot, unable to move. "What happened to you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "The night I died, it was not an accident. Clara, she was to meet me on the beach, but there were others. Jealousy, betrayal." His words faded into the wind, and I watched as the vision of him began to dissipate. Panic surged through me, and I awoke with a start, heart pounding. The journal lay open in front of me, the words about that fateful night echoing in my mind. I scrambled to read the passages again, my breath quickening as I pieced together the fragments of Henry's story. They had promised to meet at the beach, a clandestine rendezvous that had turned into a tragedy. I had to go there, to the beach where it all had happened. But the storm had intensified, and the wind howled outside, as if warning me to stay away. Yet, I felt a powerful pull, a sense of urgency that I could not ignore. Time was running out, and I needed to uncover the truth behind Henry's tragic fate before it was too late. With determination coursing through me, I rose to my feet, ready to brave the tempest outside. I had to find Clara and learn more about that fateful night. The storm may have been fierce, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside me as I prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The wind howled like a living thing as I steered my car along the desolate coastal road. Rain lashed against the windshield in sheets, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and my heart raced with a mix of adrenaline and dread. I felt small and insignificant against the relentless fury of the storm, but then I caught sight of it. A solitary lighthouse standing proud against the darkened sky, its beam cutting through the night like a beacon of hope. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching as I pulled into the gravel parking area. The lighthouse loomed above me, its lights spinning in a rhythmic dance, and I felt an inexplicable pull towards it. I stepped out of the car, the rain immediately soaking me to the bone, but the thought of finding shelter from the tempest drove me forward. I dashed to the entrance and shoved the heavy door open, stepping into a world that felt frozen in time. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and salt, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The sound of waves crashing violently against the rocks echoed in the distance, a haunting reminder of the storm's power. My eyes were drawn to a dusty table in the corner, where an old diary lay abandoned. I approached it cautiously, wiping away layers of dust that obscured its cover. The leather was cracked, and as I opened it, a chill ran down my spine. The pages were yellowed, filled with spidery handwriting that spoke of long-lost memories. As I began to read, the light flickered ominously overhead, casting shadows that danced along the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The words on the pages told the story of a man named Henry, a sailor who had loved a woman named Clara. The romantic undertones quickly twisted into dark tales of jealousy and rage, and I found myself captivated by the tragedy that unfolded with each turn of the page. Why did it have to end like this? I muttered to myself, feeling the weight of Henry's sorrow seep into my bones. The storm outside raged on, but my focus remained on the diary. I flipped to another page, where a drawing caught my eye, a sketch of Clara, beautiful and filled with life. There was a note scribbled beside it, mentioning a fateful night at sea. I could almost hear the echoes of their laughter, but it was quickly overshadowed by the oppressive silence that filled the far reaches of the lighthouse. Suddenly, a noise startled me. I whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing but the darkness behind me. "Get a grip, Jake," I chided myself, forcing my attention back to the diary, but the feeling of being watched clung to me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. The whispers of the past seemed to swirl around me, carried by the howling wind outside. The storm had become my only comfort. It masked the sounds of my racing heart, the gnawing anxiety that had settled in my gut. Just a little more, I urged myself, diving deeper into the tale of Henry's life. It was as if the diary was alive, weaving a web of fate that connected me to the tragic events that had transpired long before I set foot in this forsaken place. As I immersed myself in Henry's world, I felt an overwhelming need to uncover the truth behind his sorrow. The diary revealed secrets of a love that had been torn apart by betrayal and loss. Each word pulled me deeper into the mystery, and I could sense that I was on the brink of something monumental. With a sudden burst of determination, I closed the diary and resolved to seek out the truth. There had to be someone in the village who remembered Henry and Clara, someone who could help me piece together the fragments of their story. I tucked the diary under my arm, steeling myself against the wind and rain as I stepped back outside, the storm now a menacing specter on the horizon. The village was a ghost town, the streets eerily silent as I wandered through the downpour. My shoes squelched in the mud, and I could feel the weight of the villagers' gazes upon me, even though I couldn't see them. I needed answers, and the first person I encountered was an old woman hunched over a wooden cane, her face lined with years of hardship. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice barely cutting through the sound of the storm. "I'm looking for information about Henry and Clara. Do you know anything about them?" Her eyes narrowed, suspicion etched deep into her features. "That's a name best left in the past," she replied, her voice gravelly. "The lighthouse is a cursed place. Henry was a good man, but his love for Clara brought nothing but tragedy." I felt a chill race down my spine as she spoke. "What do you mean? What happened?" I pressed, desperate for answers. "Jealousy," she said with a shake of her head. "A man named Tom couldn't stand to see them together. It all ended in bloodshed, and now the lighthouse holds their pain." Before I could ask more, a young man stormed up to us, anger etched across his face. "What are you doing here?" He spat at me, his eyes blazing. "You're just here to mock their memory, aren't you?" "Tom," I asked, recognizing him from the diary. "I'm not here to disrespect anyone. I want to understand what happened." "Leave this place," he warned, stepping closer. "You don't belong here. You don't know what you're messing with." I felt the tension crackle in the air between us, but I stood my ground. I can't just walk away. I need to know the truth. Tom's expression darkened, and I sensed the weight of secrets in his silence. "You think you can handle it? You think you can understand what happened that night?" His voice dripped with disdain. "What night?" I pushed, the urgency in my tone rising. "What happened between Henry and Clara?" He hesitated, and for a moment, the storm seemed to quiet, as if the universe was holding its breath. Then he spoke, his voice low. "It was a night of betrayal, of love twisted into something dark. Clara was supposed to be mine, but she chose Henry. And Henry," he shook his head, his fists clenching, "he should have never gotten in the way." I felt a knot twist in my stomach as the pieces began to fall into place. "You were the rival?" I asked, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. "You were the reason for the conflict?" "Enough!" Tom shouted, and I took a step back, startled by his outburst. "You don't know anything. You're just digging up old wounds." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the cusp of unraveling something monumental. "I'm not afraid," I declared, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to know the truth. For Henry, for Clara." With that, I turned and headed back toward the lighthouse, driven by a force I couldn't name. The rain pelted my skin like icy needles, but I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. I pushed open the heavy door of the lighthouse, the familiar musty smell enveloping me once again. As I settled back into the light of the lantern, the diary felt heavier in my hands, its weight a reminder of the lives it contained. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers I sought were waiting for me on those pages. But I also knew that each revelation would bring me closer to a truth that might shatter everything I thought I understood about love, betrayal, and the lingering shadows of the past. And as I opened the diary once more, I steeled myself for the darkness that lay ahead. The wind howled like a banshee outside the lighthouse, and rain lashed against the weathered walls, creating a symphony of chaos that matched the turmoil in my mind. I had barely stepped inside when I felt the weight of the history surrounding me. The air was thick with the scent of mold and salt, and I could hear the relentless waves crashing against the rocks below. I had come here seeking refuge from the storm, but it seemed I had stumbled into something much darker. As I settled into the dimly lit room, my eyes landed on the dusty diary resting on the table. My fingers brushed against its worn leather cover, and a shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't help but wonder how many secrets lay hidden within its pages. I opened it, and the faint scent of old paper wafted up, mingling with the musty air. The first few entries spoke of mundane things: a sailor's life, the daily grind, the simple joys of being at sea. But then, the tone shifted. Henry loved Clara? I murmured to myself, the name echoing in the silence. There was something about the way he wrote about her that struck a chord deep within me. It was a passionate love, filled with longing and dreams of a future together. But as I turned the pages, the romance soon twisted into something darker. A tale of jealousy and betrayal. I felt an unsettling chill creep in, and the flickering light overhead matched the anxiety bubbling within me. Suddenly, a rustle behind me snapped me back to reality. I whipped around, my heart racing, but the room was empty. Just my imagination, I told myself. The storm outside intensified, and I could swear I heard whispers. Faint, distant, but unmistakably there. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. I needed to focus on Henry's story. I delved deeper into the diary, and as I read about the fateful night that changed everything, a sense of urgency washed over me. Clara had been waiting for Henry on the beach, under the light of the moon, when a storm had rolled in unexpectedly. The words betrayal and rival jumped off the page, and I felt a connection to the tragedy unfolding in front of me. My heart raced not just from fear, but from a sense of purpose. I had to uncover the truth. Just then, the door creaked open, and I turned to see Agnes, the elderly woman I had met earlier. Her eyes were wide with concern, and she stepped inside, shaking off the rain. "You shouldn't be here, young man," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The lighthouse holds too many secrets." "I'm trying to understand what happened to Henry," I replied, my voice steady despite the unease creeping in. "I found his diary. There's so much pain in his words." Agnes frowned, her gaze drifting to the diary. "Henry was a good man, but he was caught in a web of jealousy and betrayal. You must be careful, Jake. The spirit of Henry is restless, and the storm is not just outside. It's within these walls." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling my heart race at her words. "What happened to him?" "Tom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was Henry's friend once, but jealousy turned him into a rival. The night of the storm, everything changed. If you seek the truth, you must tread lightly." Her warning hung in the air as I considered my next move. I felt a growing sense of dread, but I couldn't turn back now. "I need to talk to the villagers," I said, more to convince myself than anyone else. "They might know more about what happened." Agnes hesitated, her wrinkled hands trembling. "You may not like what you find, Jake. Some truths are buried for a reason." "I have to know," I insisted, my resolve hardening. "I can't leave without understanding the whole story." "Very well, but be cautious," she warned. "Tom is dangerous. He hasn't forgotten, and he doesn't take kindly to outsiders digging up the past." With that, Agnes left, and I was left alone once more with the diary. I could feel the spirits of the past pressing in around me, urging me to uncover the truth. I decided to venture out despite the storm. As I stepped outside, the rain pelted me like icy needles, and the wind nearly knocked me off my feet. I made my way toward the village, my heart pounding with every step. I needed answers, and I wouldn't let fear stop me. I approached the first house I saw, an old cottage with a sagging roof. Knocking on the door, I was greeted by a middle-aged woman with tired eyes. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone suspicious. "I'm looking for information about Henry and Clara," I said, trying to sound confident. "I was at the lighthouse and found his diary." At the mention of Henry's name, the woman's expression shifted. "You shouldn't be asking about them," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's better to forget." "Why?" I pressed, feeling frustration rise. "What happened? What did Tom have to do with this?" "Tom was Henry's friend once," she replied, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. "But when Clara was involved, everything changed. He couldn't stand the thought of losing her." Her words struck a chord, and I felt a sense of urgency to find Tom, to confront him about what I had learned. "Where can I find Tom?" I asked, hoping she would help me. "Just be careful," she warned. "He's not the same man he used to be." After a few more questions, I finally learned where to find Tom. As I made my way through the village, the rain continued to pour, and my heart raced with anticipation and dread. I found Tom at a rundown tavern, the kind of place that seemed to hold more shadows than light. The moment I entered, Tom's gaze locked onto mine, and a flicker of recognition flashed across his face. "What do you want?" he snapped, his tone aggressive. "I want to know the truth about Henry and Clara," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I found his diary, and I know there's more to the story." "Leave it alone," Tom growled, his fists clenched. "You don't know what you're getting into." "I'm already in it," I shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. "Henry's spirit is restless, and I can't just ignore it." Tom's expression darkened, and I could see the conflict within him. "You think you can just come here and dig up the past?" he spat. "You don't know anything about us." "Then tell me," I demanded, my voice rising. "Tell me what happened that night." His face twisted with anger, and for a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But then, something in his eyes shifted. Fear, perhaps. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and shaky. "It's not just about Henry or Clara. It's about all of us. We were all caught in something we couldn't control." "What do you mean?" I pressed, sensing that I was finally getting somewhere. "Clara was promised to me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But she loved Henry, and it drove me mad. That night, I went to confront him, and everything spiraled out of control. I could feel the weight of his words, the pain and regret that lingered in the air." "What happened?" I pressed, desperate to understand. "It was a storm like no other," he continued, his gaze distant. "I confronted him on the beach, but the wind was howling, and we couldn't hear each other over the noise. I was so angry, I pushed him. I didn't mean for him to fall. I thought he would just back down. The pieces began to fall into place, and I felt the atmosphere shift, as if the very walls were closing in on us. "You killed him," I whispered, horrified. "No," he shouted, his eyes wide with desperation. "I didn't mean to. It was an accident. But Clara, she never forgave me. She blamed me for everything." The storm outside raged on, and I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "You need to make this right," I said, my voice fierce. "You owe it to Henry and Clara." But as I looked into Tom's eyes, I knew he was far from remorseful. "I can't," he said, his voice cracking. "It's too late. The damage is done." With that, the tension in the air shifted again, and I felt an icy presence behind me. I turned slowly, and there he was, Henry, the ghostly figure of the man whose story had consumed me. His expression was one of anguish, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Henry," I breathed, my heart racing. In that moment, the reality of the situation crashed down on me. Tom's face went pale as he turned to see the spirit of his former friend. "Henry!" Tom shouted, stumbling back in fear. I didn't mean to, but Henry's gaze was fixed on me, as if I were the only one who could hear his silent plea for justice. I could feel the weight of his sorrow, the burden of a life cut short by betrayal. The storm outside intensified. The wind howled like a banshee outside the lighthouse, rattling the old windows and sending chills down my spine. I stood there, my heart pounding, staring at Tom, whose face was twisted in anger. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of Henry's ghostly presence pressing down on me. I had come to confront the truth, but now, standing face to face with Tom, I wondered if I had stepped too far into dangerous territory. "Why are you here?" Tom spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You should leave this place. You don't know what you're meddling with." I took a step closer, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I know more than you think, Tom. I know about Henry and Clara. I know about the jealousy and the rivalry that led to his death. You think you can intimidate me into silence, but I'm not backing down. Stay out of this." Tom's eyes blazed with fury, and I could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. "Henry was a fool who brought his own end. You think you can save him by digging up old bones? You don't know anything about the real story. Then tell me," I challenged, my voice steady despite the fear creeping into my gut. "Tell me what really happened that night. You were his friend. You owe him that much." He stepped forward, his chest heaving. "You don't understand. It wasn't just jealousy. It was betrayal. Clara played us both, and she got what she wanted. She led him to his doom." "Betrayal?" I echoed, feeling a surge of anger. "You're the one who's trying to cover up the truth. Clara loved Henry. She would never have betrayed him intentionally." Tom laughed, but it was a hollow sound, devoid of any real humor. "Love? You think that's what it was?" She had me wrapped around her finger while pretending to love him. "I was there, Jake. I saw it all. The way she looked at him, the way she laughed with him. I should have killed him then. Why didn't you?" I pressed, sensing that I was finally getting under his skin. "Why didn't you confront him? Instead, you let things spiral out of control." "Because I was too late," Tom shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the lighthouse. By the time I figured it out, it was already too late. I couldn't let him see me weak. I thought I could win her back. I thought I could make her choose me. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, despite the darkness that surrounded his words. "You were his friend. You should have talked to him. Instead, you let your pride get in the way." Tom's expression shifted, an internal battle raging behind his eyes. "You think it's that simple? You think you know how it feels to watch the only person you ever cared about slip away? To feel powerless?" "No, I don't," I said softly, the heat of the confrontation cooling a little. "But I know what it's like to feel haunted by the past. Henry's spirit is restless because he needs the truth to come out. He needs closure, and so does Clara." As I spoke, I caught a glimpse of something behind Tom. A flicker of movement, a shadow that seemed to pulse with energy. My heart raced, and I turned slightly, feeling the chill of Henry's presence. I wasn't alone in this confrontation. "Stop it!" Tom yelled, suddenly looking past me. "You think you can scare me with your tricks? Get out of my head." "Tom, it's not me," I said, glancing back at him. "It's Henry. He's here. Don't you dare say his name," Tom shouted, his voice breaking. "You don't understand what he was to me. He was my brother, my friend. And you, then help me," I urged, desperate to break through his wall of anger. "Help me find the truth. If you cared about him, if he was truly your brother, then we need to do this together." At that moment, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the lighthouse, and I shivered involuntarily. Tom's expression changed, an internal struggle evident on his face. He looked torn between his anger and the guilt that had begun to surface. "Why should I help you?" he said, his voice quieter now, almost defeated. "You don't know what you're asking. This isn't just some ghost story. It's my life, my past. You think I want to dig it all up again? I don't want to dig it up, Tom. I want to understand, I replied earnestly. I want to help Henry find peace, and in doing so, maybe you can find yours too. Clara deserves to know the truth, and so do you. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. I watched Tom's expression shift, the rage slowly ebbing away to reveal a man burdened by grief and guilt. You think I don't know what I did? He finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was too late to save Henry. I was too late to save Clara from my own jealousy. Do you think I sleep at night knowing that? I know it eats at you, I said gently, but holding on to that anger will only keep you trapped. Let's confront this together. Let's give Henry his peace. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in Tom's eyes, but it quickly vanished. You don't know what you're asking me to do. If I go back there, if I face Clara again, what if she can't forgive me? What if she hates me? Then we'll figure it out together, I said, reaching out a hand. You don't have to do this alone. No one should have to carry that weight by themselves. Not you, not Clara, and certainly not Henry. Suddenly, without warning, a cold gust of wind slammed into us, rattling the lighthouse door and causing the lights to flicker ominously. I instinctively took a step back, my heart racing. Tom's eyes widened in fear as he looked around, clearly feeling the presence of the spirit. Henry! He shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. I didn't mean it. I was wrong. I was just trying to protect myself. Tom, I said urgently, you need to stop running. He's not here to hurt you. He's here to find closure. We have to show him that we're ready to face the truth. But Tom's panic only grew. You don't understand. He was my friend, and I betrayed him. I'm the reason he's trapped here. In that moment, I felt a surge of energy, a wave of emotion flooding the room as Henry's spirit seemed to manifest more strongly. The air crackled with tension, and I could see a faint outline forming behind Tom, a figure cloaked in sorrow and rage. Henry, I whispered, we're trying to help you. Please, show us what you need. Tom turned and saw the ghostly figure of Henry, his expression transforming from fear to something closer to despair. I didn't want this. I never wanted this, he cried, falling to his knees. I'm so sorry, Henry. I'm so sorry. The spirit of Henry seemed to pulse with energy, and I could feel the intensity of his emotions radiating through the space. You let jealousy blind you, Tom, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. But it's not too late. You can make this right. I can't, Tom wailed, tears streaming down his face. I can't change what happened. Maybe not, I said, my heart aching for him. But you can confront it. You can tell Clara the truth, and you can finally let Henry go. He deserves to be free. Tom looked up at the spirit, his face twisted with anguish. What do you want from me? He cried, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I loved her too. As if in response, the air thickened with an overwhelming sadness, and I could see Henry's form flickering as he seemed to reach out toward Tom. You have to let her know, I urged, feeling the urgency of the moment. You have to forgive yourself and show her that you understand. It's the only way. Forgiveness, Tom whispered, his voice trembling. Can I really ask for that? It's the only way to break the cycle, I said, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. You have to confront your past, Tom. You owe it to Henry, and you owe it to Clara. In that moment, the lighthouse trembled, the wind howling louder than ever. Tom looked up at me, his expression shifting from despair to determination. I'll do it, he said, his voice steadying. I'll talk to Clara. I'll tell her everything. Good, I said, feeling a rush of hope. But you need to do it now before it's too late. As the tempest outside roared, I felt a sense of urgency wash over me. I could sense that Henry's spirit was growing more restless, more desperate. I looked back at Tom, who was now standing taller, the shadows of his guilt beginning to lift. Let's go, I said, urging him toward the door. We have to find Clara and end this. Together, we stepped out into the storm. The storm raged outside, a relentless assault of wind and rain that pounded against the walls of the lighthouse. I had barricaded myself inside, the door creaking under the force of nature's fury. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my heart racing, not just from the storm, but from the weight of what I had uncovered about Henry and Clara. The diary lay open in front of me, pages fluttering like the ghosts of the past, whispering their secrets into the dim light. I read and reread the passages, trying to piece together the fragments of a love story turned tragic. Henry had been a passionate young man, devoted to Clara, a woman caught in the web of societal expectations and personal desires. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted from romantic to ominous, unveiling a world of jealousy and betrayal that I could hardly comprehend. I needed to understand more, to find Clara and hear her side of the story. With the storm howling like a banshee, I felt an urgent need to act. I paced back and forth, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I had to solve this mystery, not just for Henry, but for myself. The feeling of being watched was growing stronger, as if Henry's spirit was urging me forward, driving me to uncover the truth that had been hidden for so long. Clara? I muttered to myself, the name rolling off my tongue like a spell. I need to find Clara. I grabbed the diary and thrust it into my backpack, my mind racing with thoughts of her. What would I say? Would she even want to talk to me, a stranger who had invaded her past? I shook my head, banishing the doubts. I had to try. I stepped outside, the storm hitting me like a wall of water. The wind whipped at my clothes, and I could barely see a few feet in front of me. The lighthouse stood tall behind me, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. I fought my way toward the village, the path slippery and treacherous. Each step felt like a battle, but I was determined. As I stumbled into the village, I saw the faint glow of lights filtering through the rain. I approached the nearest house, a quaint structure that looked like it had weathered many storms. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. After a few moments, an elderly woman opened it, her face creased with worry. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I'm looking for Clara," I said breathlessly. "Is she here?" The woman hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. "What business do you have with her?" "I need to talk to her about Henry," I replied, desperation creeping into my voice. "I found his diary in the lighthouse, and I think I can help." At the mention of Henry, the woman's expression changed, a mixture of fear and sadness washing over her face. "You shouldn't be meddling in that," she warned. "Leave the past where it belongs." "I can't," I insisted. "I need to know the truth. Please, can you tell me where I can find her?" With a heavy sigh, the woman stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. "Fine, but you'll regret it. Clara's been through enough." I stepped inside, shaking off the rain as I followed her down a narrow hallway. The house felt warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The woman led me to a small living room where a fire crackled softly in the hearth. "Wait here," she said before disappearing into another room. I could hear her shuffling around, and my nerves tightened. What if Clara didn't want to talk to me? What if I had gone too far? Moments later, the woman returned, followed by a frail figure. Clara stepped into the room, her silver hair framing a face etched with the lines of sorrow and loss. Her eyes, though clouded by age, held a depth of emotion that made my heart ache. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a whisper, yet firm. "I'm Jake," I replied, my voice slightly trembling. "I found Henry's diary in the lighthouse. I wanted to learn more about him and what happened." Her expression darkened, and I could see the walls around her heart fortifying. "Why would you want to dredge up the past?" she asked, a hint of anger lacing her words. "I think there are things left unresolved," I explained, trying to keep my tone gentle. "Henry's spirit is restless, and I believe he needs closure. I thought you might help me understand." Clara stared at me, her gaze penetrating, searching for something in my eyes. "You don't know what you're asking," she said slowly. The past is a dark place, filled with shadows. I know, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. But I need to hear your side. Henry loved you. The diary spoke of his devotion, but there was so much pain. I think there's more to the story. She turned away, her hands trembling as she gripped the back of a chair. What do you know of love? Of loss? Of betrayal? Her voice cracked, and I could see the tears pooling in her eyes. I know that it can consume you, I said softly, but it can also set you free. Please, Clara, I'm here to listen. After a long pause, she finally turned back to me, her expression softening just a fraction. Henry was my everything, she said, her voice a mere breath. But our love was never meant to be easy. Tom was always there, lurking in the shadows, a constant reminder of what we could never have. Tom, I repeated, feeling a chill run down my spine. I had heard his name before, but I didn't realize how deeply entangled he was in this story. Yes, she said, her voice wavering. He was Henry's friend, or at least he pretended to be. But when he found out about us, everything changed. He felt betrayed, and I was caught in the middle. What happened? I pressed, eager to piece together the fragments of this tragic love story. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Henry and I would meet secretly down by the beach. We dreamed of escaping this place, of starting a new life together. But Tom found out. He confronted Henry one night, and I could hear them arguing from where I hid. What did Tom say? I asked, my pulse quickening. He accused Henry of stealing me away, of ruining his life, Clara continued, her voice trembling. It was as if he believed I belonged to him. He was furious and threatened Henry. I tried to intervene, but they were too caught up in their anger. Did it get violent? I asked, my heart racing. Clara nodded slowly. I didn't see it, but I could feel it. The tension in the air was palpable. I ran to the beach, hoping to find them, but all I found was the aftermath. Henry was gone, and Tom was nowhere to be found. Did you ever find out what happened to him? I asked, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. I never saw Henry again, she whispered, her voice breaking. And when Tom returned, he claimed it was an accident, that Henry had drowned in the storm. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. I could sense the turmoil within her, the guilt that had plagued her for years. But you didn't believe him, I said gently. No, she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. I knew Tom was lying. I could feel it in my bones. But I was too afraid to confront him, to dig deeper. I just wanted to forget, but I couldn't. Clara, I said, reaching out to her, you have to let go of that fear. Henry's spirit is still here, bound to this place, waiting for the truth to be revealed. You can help him find peace. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. How? How can I help him? Tell me everything, I urged, my heart racing at the thought of finally uncovering the truth. Every detail, every memory. We can face Tom together. We can bring Henry's story to light. Clara took a deep breath, her resolve returning. All right, she said, wiping her tears away. I'll tell you everything, but you must promise me. Promise me that you will be careful. Tom is not someone to be trifled with. I promise, I said firmly, feeling the weight of her trust settle upon my shoulders. Let's do this together. As she began to recount her memories, I realized that the storm outside wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a reflection of the turmoil within both of us. The past was a tempest, and we were caught in its fury, searching for the truth amidst the chaos. I could feel Henry's presence growing stronger, urging us forward, pushing us to confront the shadows that had haunted this place for far too long. I drove through the relentless storm, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as the wind howled like a banshee outside. Each gust rocked the car, and the rain blurred my vision, turning the road into a winding ribbon of darkness. But there, in the distance, I spotted it. The lighthouse, its beam cutting through the storm like a knife. I felt an inexplicable pull toward it, a beacon of hope in this chaos. Pulling into the gravel lot, I stepped out into the deluge, the cold water soaking through my clothes instantly. I dashed into the lighthouse, the door slamming shut behind me with a loud thud that echoed through the damp interior. Inside, I was greeted by the musty scent of mildew and the distant roar of the ocean crashing against the rocks below. My heart raced as I caught sight of a dusty journal resting on a table, its pages yellowed with age. I reached for it, feeling a chill creep up my spine as the light above flickered ominously. As I opened the journal, I discovered it belonged to a man named Henry, a sailor whose words danced between longing and despair. He spoke of Clara, a woman from the village, and their love story unfolded like a fragile petal in the storm. Yet, as I read deeper, I felt the shift in tone. Jealousy seeped through the ink, and tragedy loomed over their tale like the storm clouds outside. "Clara, my sweet Clara," I whispered aloud, feeling a connection to this past life. The words poured from the pages, rich with emotion but tinged with a darkness I couldn't quite grasp. My heart ached for Henry, yet a ripple of unease washed over me. I sensed someone watching me. Just as I turned the page, a noise echoed behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but found nothing but the empty room. The whispers began again, distant yet haunting, as if the very walls of the lighthouse held secrets I was meant to uncover. As the storm raged on outside, I dove deeper into Henry's story. I learned of the fateful night when he and Clara had planned to meet under the stars, a promise made in the shadows of the cliffs. I felt Henry's anguish as he recounted his growing jealousy towards a rival, a man who had cast a shadow over their love. My fingers trembled as I traced the lines of the journal, feeling the weight of their tragedy. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and an elderly woman entered, her presence commanding despite her frail appearance. "You're reading his story, aren't you?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "Who are you?" I stammered, instinctively clutching the journal closer. "I am Agnes," she said, her eyes piercing through the dim light. "The lighthouse has its secrets, and Henry's tale is one of them. You should not meddle with the past, young man." "I need to know what happened," I replied, desperation creeping into my voice. Henry and Clara, they had something real, but it ended in tragedy. Agnes sighed, her gaze drifting to the storm outside. "The lighthouse is a cursed place. Henry's spirit cannot rest until the truth is revealed. You must tread carefully." Before I could respond, a young man stormed into the room. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, glaring at me with fierce intensity. "You're disturbing the memory of Henry." "Tom, stop." Agnes raised her hand, but he stepped closer, fists clenched. "You have no right to be here, poking around in things that don't concern you." "I'm just trying to understand," I said, my voice steady. "Henry's story matters. Clara matters." Tom's expression darkened. "You don't know anything. Leave this village. You're not welcome here." His hostility wrapped around me like a noose, tightening with every word. I felt the weight of their stares, the townsfolk's judgment hanging in the air. "I'm not afraid of you," I shot back, defiance igniting within me. As Tom opened his mouth to retort, I felt an icy chill sweep through the room. I turned to find a glimmering object on the floor, a metal tarnished yet beautiful. I picked it up, feeling the smooth metal against my skin. It bore the image of Clara, her face frozen in time, and an overwhelming sense of loss washed over me. "What is this?" I breathed, holding it up for Tom to see. He paled, eyes widening as he took a step back. "That belongs to Henry," he shouted, a tremor in his voice. "You shouldn't have that." Agnes placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip firm yet gentle. "The past is not done with you yet, young man. Henry's spirit is restless. You must find the truth before it consumes you." I nodded, determination coursing through my veins. I needed to know more. I had to understand the events that led to Henry's demise. "I'm going to find Clara," I declared, my voice steady. Tom's expression shifted, a mixture of fear and anger flashing across his face. You don't know what you're getting into. Clara is not who you think she is." Ignoring him, I stepped out of the lighthouse and into the storm once more. The wind whipped around me, and the rain lashed against my face as I made my way toward the village. I had to find her. I had to understand her side of the story. After what felt like an eternity, I reached a small, weathered cottage nestled at the edge of the village. The door creaked as I stepped inside, and a warm glow emanated from a fireplace in the corner. And there she was, Clara, older but still possessing an ethereal beauty that spoke of her past. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling as she looked me over. "I'm Jake," I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "I've been reading Henry's journal. I wanted to talk to you about him." Clara's eyes widened, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Henry?" she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I thought I had lost him forever." "I'm trying to piece together what happened," I said gently. "I need to know the truth." She gestured for me to sit, her hands shaking as she clasped them together. "It's a painful story, one I've buried for so long. Henry was a good man, but there were forces at play that neither of us understood." "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, captivated by her words. "Tom and I had a relationship before Henry," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it was never the same. When I met Henry, it was like the world lit up. We shared dreams, hopes, but Tom did not take it well. He was possessive, angry. He couldn't let go." "Did you love Henry?" I asked, feeling the weight of her past pressing down on us. "I did," she said, her voice breaking, "but I was trapped. Tom threatened me, saying he would ruin Henry if I didn't comply with his wishes. I thought I could keep both of them safe, but I was wrong." The storm outside raged on, echoing the turmoil in her voice. "What happened that night?" I pressed, feeling the urgency of the story. "Henry and I planned to meet by the cliffs," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I never made it there. Tom caught me, and in his rage She paused, choking on her words. "He threatened me, and I was too scared to go." A heavy silence fell between us, the truth hanging in the air like a dense fog. "So, you never saw him again?" I asked softly. "I didn't," she whispered, pain etched across her face. "I heard the storm that night, howling like a beast, and then nothing, until I heard the news. Henry was lost to the sea." Clara's anguish pierced my heart, and I could see the weight of her guilt. "You have to understand, I loved him," she insisted, her voice trembling, "but I was terrified of what Tom would do." Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the letter Henry had written before his death, the one that spoke of his love for Clara. "He wrote this for you, Clara. He wanted you to know how he felt." Her hands shook as she took the letter from me, her eyes scanning the words as if they were a lifeline thrown into the depths of despair. "Oh, Henry," she whispered, reading the heartfelt confessions. "I never knew. I thought he had abandoned me." The storm outside raged on, a cacophony of wind and rain that mirrored the turmoil within. "You need to confront Tom," I urged, feeling the urgency of our situation. "He knows more than he's letting on. He needs to answer for what he did." Clara's expression hardened, a flicker of resolve igniting in her eyes. "You're right. I've spent too long hiding. It's time to face the truth." As we prepared to leave the cottage, the storm seemed to intensify, as if the very universe was reflecting our tumultuous emotions. I couldn't shake the feeling that Henry's spirit was guiding us, urging us forward in the face of danger. Together, we stepped back into the tempest, the rain pelting down like 1,000 tiny daggers. I felt Clara's presence beside me, a shared determination binding us as we approached the lighthouse once the storm raged outside, a violent cacophony of wind and rain that seemed to shake the very foundation of the lighthouse. As I stood there, clutching the letter Clara had given me, my heart raced with a mix of dread and determination. I could feel Henry's spirit, a palpable presence that hung in the air like a dark cloud, swirling with the tempest. I could almost hear his anguished cries blending with the howling wind. "Henry!" I shouted, the sound of my own voice swallowed by the storm. I'm here. I know your story. But silence followed, an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on my chest. I glanced around the dimly lit interior of the lighthouse, shadows dancing on the walls as the flickering light struggled against the encroaching darkness. The air was thick with tension, and I felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. I had to confront Henry. I had to help him find peace. I unfolded the letter, the faint scent of salt and paper enveloping me. It read, "My dearest Clara, asterisk if you are reading this, it means I have failed you. My heart is heavy with the burden of my mistakes. I never meant to hurt you, nor to bring shame upon us. My love for you was true, but I was blinded by jealousy and fear." Asterisk tears pricked at my eyes, and I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on me. "What happened to you, Henry?" I murmured, my voice trembling. "What caused this tragedy?" Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed against the lighthouse door, rattling the frame. I jumped, instinctively taking a step back. The light above me flickered violently, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Without warning, Henry appeared before me, his translucent figure pulsating with fury and sorrow. "Jake!" he bellowed, his voice echoing like thunder in the storm. "You must choose. Choose." I stuttered, confusion washing over me. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, his eyes blazing with a mix of desperation and rage. "You have the power to save one of us, Clara or me. You must decide." "No!" I shouted, shaking my head in disbelief. "This can't be how it ends. I won't choose between you." The wind howled louder, and I could feel the very walls of the lighthouse shuddering under the force of the storm. Henry's face contorted with anguish, and I could see the pain etched into every line of his spectral form. "Listen to me," he cried, his voice breaking. "I am trapped in this cycle of torment because of what happened that night. I need closure, but I cannot have it while you're here. You're in danger, and so is she." I felt my resolve wavering. "But I can help you both. I want to understand what happened. Why did you die?" "Tom," he spat, the name like venom on his lips. "He was my friend, but he betrayed me. Clara was promised to him, but she loved me. In the chaos of jealousy and rage, everything fell apart. I lost her, and I paid the ultimate price." "I know she didn't betray you," I said, clutching the letter tightly. "She loved you. You have to believe that." Henry's eyes softened for a moment, but then fury returned. "You don't understand. My spirit is tied to this place because of the betrayal and the love that was lost. I need you to choose, Jake. If you do not, the storm will consume you both." "No!" I shouted again, my heart racing. "I refuse to let this happen. I won't choose between you." He lunged forward, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. "If you do not choose, I will be forced to take matters into my own hands. I cannot allow you to suffer as I have." The storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows, and I could feel the very air crackling with energy. "Henry, please," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. "I want to help you. Tell me what I need to do." His expression wavered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "You must confront the truth. Only then can I find peace. But it may cost you your own life in the process." "Then I'll do it," I declared, my voice firm. "I refuse to let you continue to suffer. I'll face whatever I have to face." "Jake, you don't understand," he shouted, his voice rising in pitch. "This storm is not just weather. It is a manifestation of my pain. You need to get out of here before it's too late." But before he could finish, the lighthouse trembled violently, and I was thrown to the ground. The letter slipped from my grasp, fluttering away into the dark corners of the room. I scrambled to my feet, but the storm was raging, and I felt an unseen force pulling me toward the door. "Henry," I cried, panic rising in my chest. "Help me!" But he was gone, vanished into the swirling shadows. The door burst open, flinging rain and wind into the lighthouse as I struggled to steady myself against the chaos. The fury of the storm grew, and I felt myself being drawn outside, pulled toward the cliff's edge like a moth to a flame. "Clara!" I yelled, desperation fueling my voice. "I need you. Please, help me." I stumbled out into the tempest, the rain pelting my face like icy needles. The world was a blur of gray, and the roar of the ocean drowned out everything else. I fought against the wind, struggling to stay upright as I made my way toward the edge of the cliff where I had seen the vision of Henry and Clara. "Clara!" I shouted again, my voice nearly lost in the chaos. "Where are you?" And then, as if summoned by my plea, I saw her. Clara stood at the edge, her hair whipping wildly around her face, her expression a mix of sorrow and determination. "Jake!" she cried, her voice barely audible above the storm. "You shouldn't be out here. Clara!" I rushed toward her, my heart pounding. "I need to talk to you. It's about Henry." Her eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. "You have to leave. The storm is—" "Clara, please!" I interrupted, desperately grabbing her arm. "I need to know the truth. I need to understand what happened that night." She hesitated, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean? Henry was... He was killed because of me. I never meant for any of this to happen." "What?" I breathed, my heart sinking. "What do you mean?" "He thought I had betrayed him," she said, her voice trembling. "Tom made me feel trapped. I was afraid of what he would do if he found out about Henry. I never wanted anyone to die. Clara, you need to tell me everything," I urged, the wind howling around us. "Henry needs closure. He's suffering because of this." Tears filled her eyes as she looked out at the raging sea. "I loved Henry, but Tom was relentless. He threatened me, and I felt like I had no choice. I never wanted to hurt him." Suddenly, the storm intensified, and the ground beneath us trembled. I felt the pull of the tempest, and I knew we were running out of time. "Clara, I believe you, but we have to confront Henry together. He needs to know the truth." "But what about the storm?" she cried, fear etched on her face. "What if it consumes us? It's our only chance," I shouted over the wind. "We can't let his spirit suffer any longer." With a nod of determination, Clara took my hand, and together we made our way back toward the lighthouse, the wind howling like a banshee as we stumbled through the chaos. I could feel the energy in the air, the storm swirling with restless spirits, and I knew we had to act fast. As we entered the lighthouse, the oppressive atmosphere closed in around us, and I felt Henry's presence surge, a mix of anger and sorrow. "You've returned," he said, his voice echoing like the wind. "You dare to face me? We're here to help you, Henry," I shouted, my heart racing. "You need to know the truth." He stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. "What truth? That she betrayed me? That she loved another?" "No!" Clara cried, stepping bravely forward. "Henry, I loved you. I was afraid of what Tom would do. I never wanted you to die." A flicker of doubt crossed Henry's face, but the storm raged on, wind howling like a tortured soul. "You think I can trust you? This has been my prison for too long. Please, Henry," I implored, desperation clawing at my chest. "You don't have to suffer anymore. We're here to help you find peace. Just listen to her." The air crackled with tension, and I could see the battle within him. "You think you can save me?" he shouted, his voice rising to a fever pitch. "What choice do I have? Only you can choose to let go, Henry," Clara said softly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You have to forgive me. Forgive yourself." The storm roared in response, and I could feel the energy building, the very essence of Henry's pain swirling around us. "Clara," he whispered, his voice breaking.